Pierucci. I would like to welcome you all here at the Domaine de Pente or on Zoom, Facebook, YouTube or Twitter for those who are following us online. This press conference is organized by the Institute on Statelessness and Inclusion and the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung. And its title is Mainstreaming Statelessness, New Report Shows Promising Increased Engagement in the UPR. So to talk about this report, we have two distinguished speakers, Dr. Laura van Vaas, co-director of the Institute on Statelessness and Inclusion. And unfortunately, Eva Wuschel could not make it today, and we have the pleasure to have Mr. Jan Akam from Geneva office at the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Dr. van Vaas for the presentation of the report. Thank you very much. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, and hello to everyone in the room and at home. My name is Laura van Vaas, and I am a founder and a co-director of ISI, a civil society organization that stands with stateless people and others whose right to nationality is threatened or violated in their fight for recognition and justice. Among the ways in which we have worked to create the conditions conducive to positive change is through extensive engagement with the Universal Periodic Review, or UPR for short, including by making around 90 country submissions on the state of nationality and statelessness issues in collaboration with local, national, and international partners. Today, we are presenting a first-of-its-kind report on mainstreaming statelessness and the right to nationality in the UPR. It assesses how well these issues have been taken up within the UPR mechanism, and it offers lessons for the future. Before sharing the key findings and recommendations, I would like to say a few words about the issues themselves, about why it is so important to evaluate and improve how nationality and statelessness are addressed within human rights mechanisms such as the UPR. To do this, I'd like to tell you about just one of the many impressive advocates for nationality rights that we work so closely with, a powerful young woman with lived experience of statelessness called Neha. Neha was stateless as a child because the nationality law in her country discriminates against women, meaning that her mother could not pass on her citizenship to Neha. As a result, Neha was unable to study medicine when she finished school and to fulfill her childhood dream of becoming a doctor because only citizens could enroll in medical school. It was only when Neha was in her 20s that, thanks to extensive campaigning, advocacy, and litigation, she was able to acquire citizenship. Today, she is helping to achieve change for other people in her country who are denied their right to nationality or struggle to enjoy other human rights because they are stateless. Neha's experience is far from unique, neither her personal struggle with statelessness nor her remarkable activism and advocacy. At least 15 million people are stateless around the world today, with the nationality of many millions more under threat. Importantly, however, what Neha's story helps to demonstrate in very simple terms is how cross-cutting statelessness is as a human rights issue. Neha was denied the right to acquire a nationality as a child, despite the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights protecting this very right. She spent her whole childhood stateless, despite the Convention on the Rights of the Child requiring states to pay particular attention to realizing the right to a nationality when a child would otherwise be stateless. She was unable to acquire her mother's nationality, despite the CEDAW Convention stipulating that women have equal rights with men to transmit nationality to their children. This means that Neha's statelessness in and of itself amounted to a violation of multiple core international human rights standards. Neha's lack of nationality then prevented her from enjoying equitable educational opportunities. She was unable to study medicine. This is just one example of the consequential human rights impact that statelessness has. Denied nationality, then denied other rights because of the lack of nationality. Statelessness leads to violations of a whole array of other rights contained within human rights conventions, not only the right to education, but also health, an adequate standard of living, family life, freedom of movement, and of course, political rights. The bottom line is this: statelessness is a serious, cross-cutting human rights problem on a global scale that has a far-reaching impact on the lives of those affected. The Human Rights Council that meets here in Geneva has a critical role to play in promoting human rights. One of the most potent mechanisms for this is the Universal Periodic Review, the UPR. This is a unique system through which human rights practices are monitored in all states, on all issues, on a regular or periodic cycle. The UPR is also special because it is a peer review mechanism through which states make recommendations to other states on areas in which improvements should be made. Where recommendations are made to a state on a particular concern, such as the failure to ensure women's equal nationality rights, these can help to increase the visibility of the issue, to bring recognition and legitimacy to the struggle of those whose human rights are impacted, to open an informed dialogue on what needs to happen and how to achieve it, and to grow political will and momentum for change. So, ensuring that nationality and statelessness issues are addressed successfully at the UPR is an important part of wider efforts to remedy violations of these rights and to bring about change. Which brings me to the report that we're presenting today, which offers an evaluation of how well the UPR performs when it comes to statelessness and the right to nationality. Given that the UPR has now completed 3 full cycles, which means that all UN member states have been reviewed 3 times, this is a great moment to assess this and identify areas where mainstreaming efforts could be strengthened in the 4th cycle. This evaluative exercise was made possible by ISI's analytical database on human rights recommendations on statelessness and the right to nationality. It's an open access online resource that allows you to explore the recommendations on these issues, made not only in the UPR, but also by the UN treaty bodies and special mandate holders. The database makes it super easy to look at engagement in a particular country or region, or on a particular theme, such as women's nationality rights. What we found when we started to unpack the engagement of states on nationality and statelessness issues within the UPR was that this has evolved significantly over time. During the first cycle of the UPR, between 2008 and 2011, only 150 recommendations relevant to the right to nationality and the rights of stateless people were made. That's less than 1 recommendation per member state. The scope of these recommendations was also very limited. They focus mainly on promoting birth registration, which is one measure that can help to prevent statelessness by establishing the child's link to a state, or promoting accession to the 2 UN statelessness conventions. Moving to the second cycle, the number of recommendations relating to nationality and statelessness issues more than tripled, and a total of 503 recommendations were made as states were reviewed by their peers for the second time. In the third and most recent cycle, between 2017 and 2022, attention to nationality and statelessness increased further, with a total of 635 relevant recommendations showing the real success of mainstreaming efforts and of growing multi-stakeholder engagement. Importantly, in this cycle, the recommendations addressed a far wider range of human rights concerns relating to statelessness. They also increasingly made direct reference to statelessness, and in many cases contained much more detailed, concrete, and actionable language. These are welcome developments as they allow the UPR process to move beyond broad recognition of nationality and statelessness as human rights issues to a forum for meaningful peer-led monitoring of violations and a driving force for change. The geographic reach of recommendations in the third cycle is also encouraging. Around 80% of all states received at least 1 recommendation relating to nationality and statelessness when they were reviewed this time around. Countries that are known to be home to a large stateless population were covered much more comprehensively by recommendations in the third cycle than previously, with many receiving multiple recommendations. The highest number of recommendations were directed by states to other states where there has been significant regression on the right to nationality, such as the Dominican Republic, or where stateless populations have suffered egregious and widely publicized human rights violations, such as Myanmar, or where there are multiple severe challenges, such as in Kuwait. A total of 121 states were responsible for making the recommendations on these issues to their peers, showing clearly the impact of mainstreaming not just on the quantity and scope of recommendations, but also on the prioritization of these issues by states as they determine what recommendations to make to their peers. A number of states have been leading the way in championing these issues. In fact, a third of all relevant recommendations were delivered by just 9 countries: Mexico, Côte d'Ivoire, Brazil, Uruguay, Sierra Leone, Kenya, Spain, Argentina, and Honduras. Their commitment to addressing recommendations on nationality and statelessness has been one of the key driving forces behind the successful mainstreaming of these issues. Looking more closely at the substance of the recommendations made, we see the cross-cutting nature of these issues reflected. There are recommendations that address the root causes of statelessness and specific measures to protect the right to nationality, with a focus on women's nationality rights, the child's right to nationality, the nationality rights of racial, ethnic, and religious minorities, and situations of arbitrary deprivation of nationality. Other recommendations tackle the human rights impact of statelessness, promoting statelessness determination and protection procedures, the issuance of identity documents to stateless people, or addressing their access to specific rights and services. Contained within the single issue area of nationality and statelessness are a wide array of separate but often intersecting challenges, each of which links to specific normative standards. And our analysis of all of these UPR recommendations points towards greater engagement across the board, but with some topics and contexts receiving considerably more attention than others. Promoting gender equality in nationality law has been the most successful example of nationality and statelessness-related topics mainstreamed in the UPR. Whereas there were only 17 recommendations on this issue in the first cycle, an impressive 143 recommendations addressed this topic in the third cycle, including 5 that were directed to Neha's country. The report identifies the key factors that contributed to the successful engagement of the UPR on this issue, from which learnings can be drawn for the future. These include a dedicated UN Human Rights Council resolution that helped to put the issue firmly on the map for the UPR, and coordinated UN and civil society campaigning, including through the work of the Global Campaign for Equal Nationality Rights. Moreover, while the report does not evaluate the status of implementation of recommendations, it does observe how real-world progress towards women's equal nationality rights has followed UPR engagement in a number of countries over the past decade. These include Madagascar, Sierra Leone, and Liberia, and with reform now underway in Malaysia. In contrast to the attention to gender discrimination, far fewer recommendations have been made on racial, ethnic, or religious discrimination in nationality law and practice, just 28 in the third cycle. This is of concern, given that such discrimination is one of the most significant drivers of statelessness globally, with an estimated 75% of the world's stateless population belonging to minority communities. Engagement on the child's right to nationality, as protected under the CRC, has improved considerably. But there is also real opportunity for this to be further strengthened. Between the first and second cycle, there was a significant uptick in the number of recommendations made to promote birth registration, which plays a part in protecting children from statelessness. Between the second and the third cycle, there was a subsequent increase in attention to other factors that impact the child's right to nationality. However, there remain considerable gaps in monitoring for the foundational safeguard that international law prescribes to prevent childhood statelessness, which is for the state in which an otherwise stateless child is born to grant nationality. 20 recommendations on this issue were made in the third cycle, but there are in fact 60 states globally that have no such safeguard in place, and many more where the safeguards are inadequate or poorly implemented. Our analysis also takes in recommendations relating to the enjoyment of other human rights by stateless people and similarly shows a positive trajectory with the opportunity to achieve more. There has been a 10-fold increase in recommendations on this issue, from 5 in the first cycle to 52 in the third. These recommendations also touch on a wide range of human rights impacts of statelessness, from education to health, social services, freedom of movement, employment, freedom of expression and assembly, and voting rights. But if we look more closely at the enjoyment of the right to nationality by stateless people, a problem that you'll recall that Neha faced, we see just 6 recommendations in total that explicitly address this issue, even though limited access to education is a widely documented problem for stateless people in many countries. As we move into the fourth cycle, there is both the need and the opportunity to build on the foundations that the recommendations issued to date have laid, in terms of marking out these issues that can be brought within the peer review mechanism. We can now move beyond mainstreaming efforts and invest in achieving more consistent, complete, and comprehensive coverage of the full spectrum of violations of the right to nationality and the rights of stateless people globally. This evaluation of the third cycle offers some valuable lessons that can help to inform the next phase of engagement. For instance, the report highlights the importance of ensuring that nationality and statelessness issues are well documented in the 3 main sources of information that help to inform the UPR process: the national report by the state under review, the UN compilation document that collates information from UN agencies, special procedures, and treaty bodies, and the stakeholder submissions by civil society organizations, national human rights institutions, and regional organizations. Across all 3 of these, the third cycle showed major progress. As of the start of the cycle, statelessness was added as a separate heading for reporting in the guidance note to states for compiling their national reports, and around half of all national reports contain information on nationality and statelessness issues. During the third cycle, nationality and statelessness issues were included in 84% of the UN compilation documents, and in many of these, the issue also had increased visibility thanks to a separate heading. Similarly, civil society engagement with the UPR has grown considerably. Over half of the summaries of stakeholder submissions include nationality and statelessness issues, and my own organization, together with our partners, has made detailed submissions focusing exclusively on the right to nationality and the rights of stateless people for 74 states during the third cycle. This improved availability of information achieved in this way through multi-stakeholder engagement has had a clear impact on recommendations. For example, out of the 45 states that received 5 or more relevant recommendations in the third cycle, 36 had information about nationality and statelessness issues included in the summary of stakeholder submissions, and 44 had such information in the UN compilation document. The availability of tools, such as ISI's database on UN recommendations on nationality and statelessness, also helps to ensure that the relevant history of engagement by states within the UPR, as well as by other UN human rights bodies, is readily available, and that this can be drawn on in formulating new recommendations. Looking ahead to the fourth cycle, the key will be to further strengthen and expand multi-stakeholder engagement and coordination. Building on the evidence base and existing body of recommendations that now exists, it will be important to close remaining gaps in geographic coverage and ensure that those issues that have so far been somewhat marginalized are now brought to the fore. For instance, we can draw lessons from the techniques used to address women's nationality rights and adapt these to more effectively tackle other forms of discrimination in the enjoyment of nationality rights and the statelessness of minorities. States that have already played a catalytic role in raising nationality and statelessness within the UPR to date can help to ensure continued and deepened mainstreaming, lead the way in those areas that have yet to be covered comprehensively, and encourage their peers to also participate more actively in the UPR on this issue. As these efforts continue, it will also be vital to introduce and support enhanced avenues for the inclusion, input, and engagement of people with lived experience of statelessness in the UPR process. Ultimately, the UPR needs to drive change for people who are directly impacted by the denial of the right to nationality, like Neha. So innovating ways to bring them closer to the process will help to ensure that the recommendations made are more effectively targeted to genuine needs and will be taken up in advocacy on the ground to ensure that real-world change actually happens. I would like to close by thanking the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung for their support and collaboration on this evaluation, which has delivered so many useful insights into the performance of the UPR mechanism for nationality and statelessness. At ISI, we look forward to taking these lessons into our own future UPR engagement with our partners. Our team is also ready and excited to provide any and all support that we can offer on the basis of our expertise and experience to all of the stakeholders who are engaged with the UPR. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura. Mr. Yanakam, you have the floor for Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung.
Did you want to take questions first, or do you want to...
We can take questions at the end,
okay,
so
great.
we can both
Perfect.
give your presentations and then we can take
Okay,
questions.
that's
Thank
great. So I'm here on behalf of the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung Geneva office. So we are an international non-profit organization for international solidarity as the key to social ecological transformation and the implementation of social rights on a global scale. And following our vision of a future society based on the full realization of democratic and social rights for all people, we advocate for the rights of stateless people worldwide. Our aims from the beginning has been to generate more attention to the issues of statelessness and the UPR as a cooperative mechanism based on objective and factual information, treating all states equally and involving states in the review has, in our view, made an important contribution. We're very pleased as an office with the outcome of the analysis of the first 3 UPR cycles, which shows the engagement against statelessness is increasing. We welcome the mainstreaming of statelessness and agree with the recommendations of the report, and that in addition to the issue of nationality and statelessness, more attention needs to be paid to the root causes, hidden and systematic problems, as well as discrimination and related human rights violations faced by stateless people. We also welcome the recommendation to states to include stateless communities in the process of overcoming statelessness. And we hope that this report will contribute to helping states overcoming statelessness. And I'd like to finish by saying that the strongest points of the report, apart from the assessment and analysis, are certainly their target group-specific recommendations that will support the various actors in developing individual roadmaps to end statelessness. And thanks a lot, Laura and ISI, for your hard work.
Thank you very much both for your interventions. So if you have questions in the room, please raise your hand and we will take questions from you. Or as well online, if you have questions online, you can raise your electronic hand and we will take you here in the room and online. So I don't know if there are questions online. I think there is a question online, so we will take Mr. Dreary Dyke.
Hi, thanks very much. Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Jan. Great work from the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation to get behind this. It's really fantastic. And Laura, really excellent. Very, it just highlighted so much. Just a disclaimer as I speak. I'm one of the partner organizations. I work with one of the partner organizations of ISI, Salam for Democracy and Human Rights. We've done work on Kuwait. And I guess my main takeaway, Laura, from your talk is that there's a lot of awareness. Awareness has grown a huge amount, but you must share my frustration and the frustration of others that we know in Kuwait, that actual change hasn't happened. That Myanmar, Dominican Republic, Kuwait, even with all positive soundings coming from the countries that you enumerated, mainly from Latin America, that this hasn't happened. And I guess I'd like you to comment, if you would, on the idea of going back to big states, US, as a collectivity, the European Union, to get what you referred to in your talk, a resolution at the Human Rights Council to make this issue, give us on this side of the fence more leverage. And indeed, if the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation could help us leverage that sort of muscle to get other states support for a kind of new soft standard. You know, years ago, the Obama administration, 2007, 2008, did sponsor a resolution at the Human Rights Council. I think in the past, maybe the Russian Federation has done so as well. Can we do it again? I guess that's what I'm getting to. Can we actually help usher in more active, actual change? That's it. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Dyke. Maybe Laura, the question was for you.
Sure, of course. Thank you. It's a really excellent question, and I certainly share in the frustration of the gap between what is discussed on the issue and what is actually happening on the ground by way of change. And I think that it's important to recognize that using international systems, such as the ones that exist here in Geneva, plays an important, hugely important part in increasing the visibility of the issue, in legitimizing the struggle of those who are involved in advocacy nationally or locally. But it is not a magic wand that can create solutions from here in Geneva. I do agree that there are ways, though, in which the system that does exist here could have more impact. And I think the suggestion, indeed, of looking at a new resolution of the Human Rights Council is absolutely spot on. We see very clearly, and the report details this as a case study, how at the outset of greater coordinated efforts around women's nationality rights, it was a resolution in the Human Rights Council that put this issue on the map, that created leverage. It allowed a space for engagement on that issue with a very wide range of players. And it made it possible for civil society organizations that are engaging with governments at the national level to also have this tool in hand. And it also opened pathways to more support for their work. Ultimately, we need additional resourcing for the work of groups that are doing litigation work, advocacy work, campaigning work at the national level. And the recognition and legitimacy that is offered by a Human Rights Council resolution can also help to pave the way for that. So I think that there is scope to explore doing something similar around the issues that have received less attention to date, in particular around discrimination and minority statelessness, as well as around the child's right to a nationality. And I think that those could be a really important starting point to really push the engagement beyond sort of the realms of Geneva, and a clear ask of states in terms of what more could be done. And I also think that if a resolution on either of those topics were to be developed at this time, it could absolutely draw on existing normative guidance, existing engagement on these very issues by states within the UPR, and translate those into a document that can be used to really assert those rights. So I think that would be an excellent development if it were possible.
Thank you. Is there some questions in the room? Maybe we can take also a question in the room. If it's not the case, I have maybe more a local question. We often say that Geneva is the city of human rights, and what has been done by Switzerland, and what can be done here in Geneva by the canton, but maybe also by the Swiss Confederation in regard to this statelessness in Switzerland. If you have some information or some data about Switzerland and that you could share here.
Thank you. It's a difficult question. I should immediately add the disclaimer that data on statelessness is notoriously patchy. It's very difficult to have accurate, comprehensive numbers around how many people are stateless, both because it can be difficult to identify statelessness. People don't necessarily know to self-identify as stateless if they're asked, or there may be an assumption that they hold a nationality, which in practice they don't. And there are other reasons why reporting of data is also challenging. So Switzerland, like most other countries in Europe and certainly around the world, it's difficult to give a definitive answer to how many people are stateless, but it's certainly into the hundreds of people, if not more. And it tends to be a problem that exists for people who have come to Switzerland perhaps as refugees, and either they had their nationality stripped from them in their home country, and this was part of the persecution and the human rights violations that have driven them to seek asylum elsewhere, or they arrived in Switzerland with a nationality and have since lost that nationality. So around the world today, you still have many people who were formerly citizens of the Soviet Union, for example, who have been unable to establish a nationality of any of the other countries following the dissolution of the Soviet Union. So you have a really interesting environment in a country like Switzerland where you have stateless people who are actually from different parts of the globe, whose situation also might be quite unique to their individual circumstances. And I guess as to the question of what more can be done, in any setting, talking about the issue, removing the stigma, and educating people about what statelessness actually means, that's a really critical step where there is always a need. And also for countries to work to improve their identification of stateless people. And I know that Switzerland has been taking steps in that regard over the last decade, but there is more that can be achieved in terms of making sure that stateless people are identified as stateless, given a suitable protection status, and then put on a pathway to naturalization.
Thank you very much. Maybe someone else online, or so if it's not the case, would you like to have maybe a word to conclude and to give some, how to say, perspective of the fourth circle of, I mean, you already spoke a lot about the UPR cycle, but what can be done starting from now? And a conclusive word.
Sure, I'd be very happy to. Well, firstly, to say that tomorrow we will be taking this same set of findings to speak with states in the Palais, just around the corner. We think it's really important to provide feedback on how states have been doing in their role as peer reviewers, to give credit where credit is due for the successes in mainstreaming this issue, and to provide some suggestions about what might be improved as they make their plans for the fourth cycle. So immediate next step is to take this information to the states that are actually participating in the UPR process. And I think that looking ahead to the coming years, there are some very exciting developments happening in the field of statelessness, more groundbreaking things that haven't existed before. There is a new global alliance on statelessness in the making, which will be a collaboration of UN agencies, civil society groups, people who have lived experience of statelessness, and also with the support of states. And I think finding really clever ways for that alliance and other forms of collaboration to use existing mechanisms to have even more impact is where we need to go.
Thank you very much. Mr. Akam, maybe a conclusive word. Thank you.
Well, I just want to thank you, Laura, and all of the ISI team for your great work, and we can't wait. I'm sure all my colleagues agree with me for the event tomorrow, and can wait for further collaboration as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both of you. Thank you for coming, to you all, and I wish you all a nice day. Thank you very much.